All right. Welcome, everybody. This is our second town hall meeting for the Zeitgeist movement here in Los Angeles. We are webcasting live tonight. My name is Jason Lord. I am the state coordinator for the California chapter. I help coordinate groups up and down the coastline and other parts of the state to come together under the same principles and values that we're trying to advocate to the public, get the information out there. The layout of the evening is going to be, there'll be a presentation first, and Peter's going to give us a lecture, a bit of an orientation. I'm going to say a few words, and then we're going to spend a lot of time tonight with you.
It's a struggle to give an introduction to the movement, at least I find it to be. Most of these lectures are about 2 to 3 hours long. And every event we do, every town hall we're doing now, I'm going to try and do something new and basically from a different angle to broach the subject of what the movement's about. But it's never going to be complete. But on our website, there's tons of information at the zeitgeistmovement.com where anyone can see our videos and the PDFs and get a much more thorough understanding. What I find is that when you engage this information, the people can understand it, people in general can understand it, but it goes against a lot of value issues that people have in the way they relate to their environment. And that's usually the hurdle that you have when I describe this information. But by the end of this, there is the Q&A, as Jason pointed out, so please consider, if you have like a notebook or something, that's always great to write down any questions, because I have a feeling when I finish this presentation last night, they're going to have plenty of questions by the time I'm done, because it isn't necessarily an introduction. This is a chart of that hopefully everyone's aware of global public debt levels on this planet. I'm sure all of our ears are still bleeding from the news and the media, who have nothing better to do than to talk about this issue and the debate over and over and over again. Of course, the U.S. government's reached its debt ceiling, an arbitrary limit that basically has been doubled about 4 times since 1981, from $1 trillion to $14.3 trillion. And while the media and the U.S. Congress will continue to pretend that there are grounds for debate and the specter of debate and all of this stuff we hear in the news, there is absolutely no other option for them to raise this debt ceiling again if the U.S. plans to postpone its huge and massive sovereign debt default, which is also completely and utterly inevitable. But before I go into that, a quick parable. Let's imagine a remote island with 100 human inhabitants. A little hypothetical society decides to use a currency system to engage labor and to organize their resources. So they collect little shells and number them. They figure we're going to get 1,000 shells in circulation, and each person will be given 10 shells, and they start to exchange. At some point, one of the inhabitants, for whatever reason, finds his or herself in the position where they don't have enough shells to meet their needs. So they think for a second and they say, okay, I have my friend, maybe I can borrow some shells. So they decide to ask a friend if they can borrow 4 of their shells. And the friend agrees, but only on the condition that those 4 shells will be paid back with 2 shells added as a service fee. So they agree, and suddenly this pattern takes hold, and everyone on the island kind of begins to trade these shells as a commodity. They start to loan shells to each other for whatever purposes are necessary whenever there's a deficiency for whatever reason, in exchange, of course, for the extra shells on top. And then something really strange happens when they start to do this. Many of the inhabitants find themselves in debt to others for extended amounts, very frequently and at increasing rates. Eventually, everyone seems to be in debt to everyone else. Something is very strange in their mind. They can't quite figure out what's going on. So the little society gets together at a meeting, and they start to calculate what everyone owes to everyone else. And they find that for every 4 shells loaned, a fee of 2 shells was added, of course. And then they figured that the entire money supply had been cycled in one iteration, which meant 1,000 shells loaned 4 at a time. It produced 250 transactions. 2 shells charged per transaction, so therefore 500 shells are needed to settle the debt responsibility of the total society. But they scratch their heads because there's only 1,000 shells in circulation, so where are the other 500 shells going to come from? And then they naturally think for a moment, and in an embarrassed fashion, they cancel all of their debts universally. They laugh at themselves and wonder how they could ever have been so foolish to begin with. And this brings us back to this absurd spectacle of ignorance and insanity that I don't really know what to say the more I think about it, but the global debt crisis is fundamentally the result of the fact that our money is created out of debt and it's brought into existence through loans. We charge interest on it, on those loans. And regardless of what you hear any government official, media on this planet claim as to the solution of this supposed debt crisis, which is almost universally related to cutting budgets and social programs or endless IMF refinancing, imposing austerity, of course, which I'll talk about in a moment, nothing can or will stop this cancerous debt growth without outright global debt cancellation. Again, nothing. And if there's anything you walk away from this meeting with, I hope that is one thing. Basically, the rules of this system have to be transcended in order for it to save itself, which is very interesting because obviously it shows that the system is intrinsically flawed. And frankly, I don't know which aspect is worse, the fact that the utter insanity of this, the problem even materializes, and the causality associated, or the fact that the public at large has absolutely no clear view of this. They have no understanding of what this actually means or the mathematical reality of what we've been doing for the past century. This practice of creating money out of debt and loaning it to the public and government in exchange for fees that do not exist, it should be the absolute focal point of debate in every government, every single blatantly orange country you see here. So the problem is structural, is my point. And since the very nature of being in debt creates limitations for individuals, corporations, and governments, the detriment of this reality is vast because it opens the door for all sorts of other problems that relate to what we would define as societal collapse. And these problems that are beginning to emerge on the horizon are simply not necessary. And this is important that people begin to understand it when they begin to hear and begin to witness, in fact, over the course of the next few years, what is unfolding. It's not even remotely necessary. Now, before I go any further, though, I'm going to switch here to a different view of the monetary system that, again, isn't recognized whatsoever. We need to consider this very importantly, and this is basically the foundation of how we arrive at the new economic model that I will briefly talk about at the end of this presentation. We have two parallel opposing forces at work in the modern market system that we use. The first force could be called the money sequence of value, and I apologize for the terminology, but it really is the best frame of reference if you get used to this language. I borrow this term from a man named John McMurtry, who wrote a great book called The Cancer Stage of Capitalism, by the way. The money sequence of value refers to the governing principles of intent regarding monetary valuation and exchange. As we know, money is a medium of exchange, as it's traditionally called, but in order for money to exist as such a medium, it has to have value in and of itself. Therefore, it has to exist as a commodity in and of itself, and there's no way around that. The easiest way to understand the money sequence of value is to reflect on the obvious interest that we all have in acquiring money and maximizing profits or income, and hence saving money and reducing our expenses, hence creating what they call cost efficiency in traditional economics. Our lives today, all of us, one way or another, revolves around the management and movement of money, needless to say. And because of this, there is an empirical disconnect between the intents associated with the physical world we inhabit, intents meaning the foundational life ground of what actually supports us, along with the natural laws that we have to succumb to, and the intents generated by our monetary reality. They are completely opposing forces. To put it into a related terminology, the money sequence of value is completely decoupled from the natural life sequence of value. The life sequence values ecological balance, good public health, and other qualities of empirical human sustainability and prosperity, while the money sequence values cost-cutting and profit maximization with the assumption that this somehow magically creates and supports the life sequence. It's a historical illusion. The assumption the assumption is that, it actually reminds me of a good George Carlin joke. He's like, sometimes Adam Smith's invisible hand gives you the middle finger. That's a cute comment. The assumption is that the money sequence will give way to the life sequence, and this is completely statistically void. There's not one economic treatment I've ever seen. I've read the gamut of university documents on economics up to the doctoral level, and you won't find a statistical evaluation of this. It doesn't exist. And it's basically a religious rationale in Adam Smith's invisible hand, like this God, this invisible entity that somehow magically, if we're all out for our own self-interest and engaging the money sequence only, that it will manifest into the life sequence and everyone will be happy and balanced in prosperity and people are taken care of as a civilization. That just simply isn't true. Back then, though, historically, it's worth pointing out, because people often ask, well, what happened in our society? In the simplistic points where Adam Smith and these early capitalist notions came forward, it could be accepted in abstraction because life was much more simplistic in its use. The labor and the system of labor and the simplicity of exchange was such that you really couldn't see the inherent inefficiency built in. But as time has gone on, the true nature of the money sequence has really shown its true colors. And today, I would say most everything is officially backwards with respect to proper intent as far as survival. For example, corporations are now being rewarded for producing inferior products, creating waste, reducing efficiency overall, just to keep the material economy and the labor system going. In fact, the very notion of what an economy is supposed to be has been redefined to its opposite. No relationship to the physical world whatsoever. It's a human behavioral abstraction theory. In fact, the more problems and inefficiency in society today, the better the monetary economy. The more problems we have, the better the economy will be. And this, again, is what makes this debt picture so tragically bizarre, because it's an elaborate fiction, a fictional ledger born out of this money sequence I just spoke of. And the fact that we accept this as the basis of our practice empirically, and what people will debate to the end of time on its apparent value, to me represents a mass structural delusion. It's a big, gigantic, well, they hate to use the Zeitgeist pun, but there's a massive problem in the way people are referencing reality at this stage. It's dysfunctional. We're basically ready to shut down our entire society for reasons that don't exist. Completely fictional creations, imposing austerity to an extent that it could really affect billions and billions of people in massive ways, only because we acknowledge this rule set that we've concocted as being empirical. The United States alone has about $57 trillion of public and private debt in and of itself. That's both public and private, meaning your personal debt versus the government. And that equates to almost $200,000 per person in liability. And that debt will only grow because it has to grow. Just like our island parable, the entire world is in debt to itself, and the result is nothing but, well, complete insanity. In fact, I would say the best way to describe this is as a social cancer and a very legitimate concept. If you look at society as a singular entity, as the group mind that it is and its evolution, our brains haven't changed that much in tens of thousands of years. Our intelligence is a product of cultural conditioning and education through a serial development through time. And on that same scope, we have this cancerous notion and belief system that is basically taking us over, and we don't see it, just like any immune system doesn't see it. It continues to spread and grow, and it will just simply strangle us like a tumor with its limiting effects. Now, I'm not going to expand this point to the many other inherent flaws in the system due to time, because I could talk at length. But if anyone here wants a treatment on this, there's a lecture called Social Pathology, which was done in 2010, which is almost 3 hours long, which deals explicitly with the various manifestations that have arisen out of this false system of association we've generated for managing our society. Now, people always say, what about reform? And this is something that's always in debate. And those in the political spectrum that are aware of problems associated with debt or the Federal Reserve, they always talk about reform. Can we change the system so it directly relates to this life sequence? Is it possible? And I'm sorry to say the answer in all logical considerations is a definitive no. If money is a commodity in and of itself, holding value, there's no way the money sequence can inherently respect the life sequence. It can only exist on a contrary plane. It is simply based entirely on the opposite set of assumptions and values required to create social and environmental balance. Can it be improved? Yes, it can, but we have to remember that patchwork legislation, which is the only thing that really keeps any sanity within this system, legislation and laws are patches. They're responses to failures of a particular structural organization. And it's very important people realize that. So we can create legislation over and over again to continue to fight the inherent intents of this system, or we can bite the bullet and go at the root cause and get rid of it. And this brings us to austerity and consequences, building on the debt problem. Since most simply don't see the real problem here, all talk revolves around measures to limit borrowing and spending. This again limits our possibility and flexibility, since money is the initiator of everything. Who suffers from austerity also, historically speaking? It's always those that are most vulnerable to its causal source, which is the middle and lower classes. These are the ones that will always be hit the hardest through the limitations imposed, usually the cutting of social programs. I don't need to go on too many examples of such things that have happened historically around the world with regard to the World Bank or the IMF. So the public well-being is going to become more and more unaffordable, as comedic as that is. And any concern for public health generally has always been secondary to monetary gain, but now we see it in its most fruitful manifestation. The stat for unemployment at the moment in the U.S. is about 9%, over 9%, but that's actually not really true. It's mostly about 18 to 20% if you actually regard those that are underemployed in aggregate or that are off the record. Just as the U.S. and many governments appear in all their seriousness about job creation, if I hear one more election thing about, ooh, how can he make jobs? I mean, because it's such a belligerent statement. There's nothing that anybody in a political position can do to create jobs. It's an economic notion that's based on a certain type of causality, and the core of that flaw, which I'm about to get into, cannot be altered by any type of governmental policy unless you override the entire economic system. What we have is this thing called mechanization, which basically is increasing cost efficiency for corporations. And because corporations want to save money, and because of the exponential increase in science and technology, if anyone here has studied people like Ray Kurzweil or the Singularity Institute, you see echoes of this nuance even though they don't address the social problem. What we have is a process where labor is becoming obsolete on the human level. We have become too efficient in our creation of machines, and there's new announcements of McDonald's and many other organizations that are starting to, because they're losing money, starting to automate very, very quickly. But yet, what does that do? It reduces your purchasing power. It reduces the number of people employed. It's a self-stifling manifestation which proves the outdated and irrelevant nature of the system that we have today as it's progressed. It's being evolved out of, I'll put it that way. And on a different level, since our economy is completely based on hydrocarbons, as I'm sure most know, and not just for transport, but for packaging and everything else, which of course are not only unsafe, but on the verge of destabilizing scarcity, at least from a psychological perspective. Do you really think that any country right now, as much as everyone's talking about energy on the sidelines as well, along with labor, along with debt, do you think that any country is prepared to make the financial commitment for the creation of the abundant renewables that are really needed? The cost of infrastructure changes globally has been estimated by the Global Energy, one of the major global energy, international global energy institutions, sorry, I can't remember the name right now, to be roughly between 20 and 30 trillion dollars. And that's with a tremendous commitment coming from governments. And while, again, we're surrounded by tons of well-meaning activist groups, and I always shy away from criticizing any group out there that's trying to do something good, you really notice that virtually none of them ever talk about the true foundation of the problem, which is the monetary market system itself as the cause of these problems, whether environmental or social or so-called political. It doesn't even occur to them because they're kind of in the box, and they spend all their time combating organizations and institutions. Someone came up to me earlier, made a comment of something I had said earlier. It's like we can keep, stomping on the cockroaches as they come out from underneath the refrigerator, but until you remove the spoiled food behind it, you're not really resolving anything. And the entire process of activism right now is really us doing just that. And this brings us to this social immune system, as I think is a great way to put it, which is what the Zeitgeist movement really is hoping to manifest. We're here to try and do something before we get to this tipping point where everyone's so backs against the wall, where the wars are on edge, where the scarcity is extreme, where no one can even, the technical breakdown of society, if you will, something that really hasn't been faced yet. The Great Depression was nothing compared to what's in store for the U.S. and most of the Western world and society as a whole if massive structural changes aren't made over the course of the next decade, which could be accelerated very, very quickly in the case of certain accents, if you will, like a major natural disaster in certain regions where they have no funding to do anything. So the term the Zeitgeist movement is defined as the general intellectual, moral, and cultural climate of an era. The term movement simply implies motion or change. The Zeitgeist movement, therefore, is an organization which urges change in the dominant intellectual, moral, and cultural climate of the time. Changes in our method of social operation always mean changes in our values. And the revolution, if you will, has always been a revolution of values to begin with, which was what makes this communication project so incredibly important and difficult. People always want to talk math and building and structure, but the movement's here in many ways to just get people on board with the fundamental relationship of intent, to understand, at least accept, the nature of what values are important and will sustain us, and then we begin to extract our systems approach from those values, and hopefully that will relate to something real. Very briefly, and this is where I started last month. I did an expression where I read the statement, then I defined it. I'm going to do it again, but very, very rapidly. The Zeitgeist movement, what is our goal? We seek a new economic model based not on the movement of money and the dynamics associated, but rather on truly objective scientific resource management and allocation, strategically seeking to enable an equitable distribution of all goods and services to meet the needs of the entire global human population while ensuring maximum environmental sustainability over generational time. Very quickly, we say economic model, meaning it must be about strategic preservation and sustainability, which is what the word economy really implies. We say not the movement of money because of its inherent intent, which is decoupled from true life support. We say the need for scientific resource management and allocation because the scientific method is the only form of reasoning that exists with respect to predictable, truthful, and responsible understandings and outcomes. And we say an equitable distribution of all goods because true social stability and hence our safety, from whatever definition you can come out with, can only arise if the world's population has its needs met. And finally, we say, while ensuring maximum environmental sustainability, because obviously a true economic model, again, demands the symbiosis and the interconnectivity in relationship to what actually supports us. Our connection to the earth and its natural laws will only be misunderstood at our complete detriment. Out of this, we get a new train of thought, which arrives at a model that really becomes quite self-evident if you frame your point of reference from the life ground, meaning things that actually support life, and for the enabling of the goals that we just described, essentially, which hopefully everyone, I think, would value when they think about it. Number one, we need to move into a move from a growth economy to a steady state economy. The very idea of infinite growth, which is what we do on any level, is just plain insane. It's a pyramid scheme that's collapsing. That big debt chart is really the result of a very long pyramid scheme, which can only fail. We don't want people talking about growth all the time. It's really wacky when you actually look at this rhetoric that comes out of the political and economic sphere. Number two, we need to get away from the competitive basis and realize that collaboration is the only intelligent manner of operation. In fact, at the core of the basic economic theory of competition is the idea that it produces a collaboratory environment, which I find so hilariously paradoxical if you think about it, because they're assuming that the invisible hand, that somehow this self-interest mechanism will promote the larger order balance, again, which is ridiculous. We need a collaborative environment, devising a systems approach to Earth management and society as a whole. We can no longer operate based on cost, efficiency, and self-preservation. We need to literally calculate society in a responsible way, which is a very empirical and objective thought process. 3, we need a planned system where ideas of localization and energy reduction, eliminating waste, these become obvious needs. Globalization that we've all come to know is got to be one of the most wasteful and offensive things that we've come up with. The very concept is really based on societal manipulation, exploitation of labor in deprived countries for the sake of cost efficiency. And the very idea that we get strawberries from Chile and water from Fiji, this is really bizarre. Number 4, we need to focus on deliberate automation, as I alluded to prior. If this is a new subject to some of you, please type in technological unemployment, and you'll find some very interesting debates on this issue. Every major change of human society has come from technology and scientific ingenuity. Otherwise, we'd all still be farming with big wood plows right now. And everything that manifests our value systems has come from technological interference and evolution, if you will, one way or another. So we have to focus on deliberate automation because that's simply responsible, because we can produce more. And what we have is that the paradigm shifted away from human labor as the core foundation of social operation. It's now obsolete. And number 5, we need to devise a system that actually shares and allows less to be produced, but yet more to be utilized. And it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? If we produce less, is there really more to go around? But if you actually think of a structural system where people are sharing things like automobiles in a very sophisticated manner, or sharing different forms of goods. I'm a filmmaker. I have closets full of film equipment I'd rather not own because it takes up lots of space. I can't rent it because it's not cost efficient for me, because I need the investment of it, because I can't just rent it every time. It costs thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. I might as well buy it, as they say. But I have to hoard it all. I'd rather be able to just gain access to it and then return it. And imagine a system like that for a second. You could see a robustness of access, robustness of caring about society more so when people have that sort of connection, and so forth. This is how you would create an access abundance that you'll often see commented on in our materials. And this very brief description is kind of coalesces into this concept that we loosely define as a resource-based economic model, as opposed to a monetary or market-based economic model. And this is a terminology that you'll find, a resource-based economy. The name is a good way to reference it. What it means is you come from the ground up, from a resource-based approach. You actually understand your environment and the laws that you are, well, govern you, along with everything else around you. And you begin to build a system based on that, with the necessity for sustainability over generational time. That's kind of the loosest way I could describe it. And I'll conclude by saying that in the midst of all of this, and I'm sure there's tons of questions that can be built upon this, especially if this is very new to you, is that the greatest barrier when you talk about these things, again, is people's values, as I mentioned earlier. There are so many interesting ways people defend attributes of this system because of everything that they've grown to understand and relate to. If I was to tell a very prominent economist, PhD in such ideas, the majority of the time I do interact with people of such a nature, they tend to dismiss it without any type of technical argument at all. They have a block. They have an emotional block that goes up. And if there's anything I'll leave you with, which is probably the basis of this movement, again, as I mentioned, is that those that do want to advocate this concept need to begin to know how to deal with those that set up these emotional blocks against you. And that is really the fundamental problem, the mind lock. This is what has stifled us throughout history. You go back to Socrates, these guys, the ancient Ionian Greeks, they had slavery, yet they were supposed to be the highest peak of intellectual society. You go back to Pythagoras, who, brilliant mind, the sacred geometry, it was a religious notion that people worship Pythagoras, literally. It was whatever Pythagoras said. You see the echoes of this nuance, and you have to think forward and say to yourself, okay, what are the belief systems we have now, and how erroneous are they going to seem to us 100 years from now? And that's the type of frame of reference that I hope I can leave you with. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. I just wanted to take a few minutes to kind of go over what we're doing now with the Zeitgeist movement. The movement has developed globally, and we have what's called a chapter structure, and it's how we identify ourselves as far as a place to go wherever you are in the world. Here, this is an event hosted and put on by the Los Angeles chapter, and you get to meet some of the brains behind that here in a minute, but I'm just going to give a short overview here. Did it work? Okay, great. There are some things I hope people can take away tonight from our interaction with you. One is what the Zeitgeist movement is, what our chapters are about, what we're doing. The other thing is what we can do right now. And also a shift in your thinking, in a frame of reference, as far as your viewpoint on how things work in the world. The main purpose of what we're doing as a group is a critical project. Basically, it's a critical global mass awareness of the root causes to persistent social problems and alternatives that are available to our current human organization and our conduct. We refer to this in an oversimplified phrase, which Peter referenced as a resource-based economic model. I'm going to hold this up because I'm having a hard time looking at you and looking down again. This is a data set of scientific and technological understandings of our environment and behavior and what is necessary for the organization of resources and the application of the most optimum tools for our well-being. This is new for me, so I keep looking over my shoulder to see if the slides pop up. This is a chart of health and social problems in relationship to economic inequality. As we talk about the monetary system and the market system, the use of money and how it's evolved, there is a statistical relationship to the problems we encounter in today's world, and they are persistent problems, such as life expectancy, math and literacy, infant mortality. You can see on the left side, I can't read it here on the screen. This is from a publication called The Spirit Level, and you can see the United States way up there by itself is facing the greatest amount of social problems and enjoying the greatest amount of economic inequality at the same time. This is a reality for us, and this is where a disparity comes in, because for lots of us, we have a social value that does not pair well with what we're seeing in the world. And when you find information like this, it starts to have us ask different kinds of questions. So this ends up being our motivation. There is a necessity to have a common frame of reference in our social thinking, which includes all of you. Since I've joined the movement, my frame of reference about the world has changed tremendously, which includes understanding the outcomes of the use of money and monetary economics on the impacts of that on our behavior and on the environment around us. So the word is getting out there, and interest has been growing. I'm going to use California as an example because that's the data set that I'm familiar with. I deal with on a monthly basis. Just since what we consider the founding of the movement in 2008 till the end of 2010, interest in this and people who've actually taken the time to sign up on our state site grew from 0 to 1,500 people. There's an average of about 4,000 people visiting our local site per month from nothing a few years ago. And there's about 2,300 people have taken the time to sign up for our news resource, our newsletters, and are receiving those, and this information is getting out there so it's available to you to use in your own conversations. And in the past few years, I mentioned earlier, we've achieved 18 different cities in California have now active groups, active chapters, set up in a way where we all come together, inputting this information into the social mindset. Some examples of what we're doing. Chapters conduct their activities with a degree of autonomy, each communicating this information in their own way, but it's all from the same data set. And when I refer to, say, a data set, as in that chart I showed you a moment ago. Examples of activism and communicating this to you guys are done through the Zeitgeist film series. Events like this, our Townhall events, there are intellectual events and more events where we have speakers come in, and it's more of a lecture day, and that's done in March annually. It's called Z-Day. And we have a new first time we're doing a media festival in September. I really want to have a chance to plug this. I don't have any of the information for the screen, but if you go to thezeitgeistmovement.com or is it the Media Festival or Media Festival? It's zeitgeistmediafestival.org. This is our first, it'll be an all-day music and arts event. The purpose here is to affect culture through art. And it's a full-day event. You can buy tickets online, and the event here in Los Angeles will be on September 11th, and that'll be about an 8-hour event from 2 in the afternoon till about 9 or 10 at night. I'm not sure of the schedule yet. But that is a packed day of music, bands, comics, painting, live art, and there'll be more on that later. But you can get all this information afterwards. But I really wanted to throw that out there as an example of something new that we're trying on a massive scale. That'll be at the Music Box in Hollywood. It's a global event as well. Most of the events we're doing now are organized on a global level. So when we did a premiere of Zeitgeist Moving Forward, which is the 3rd documentary in the series, that was done in 60 different countries in about the same span of time on the same weekend. Thank you. So just, I think I'm at the end here. So I just wanted to leave you with the awareness that we engage in is not achieved through a single interaction. It's from constant engagement, continuing conversations, and education. And so I hope that as far as a frame of reference for what we're doing tonight, our greatest challenge in the Zeitgeist movement isn't the technical application of the solutions that exist to create this access abundance for the world's population. It's the value systems which are perpetuated by established institutions that comprise the largest part of our society, and again, namely the monetary, political, and religious establishments are examples of that. These fixed frames of reference are the most difficult for us to address. So in conclusion, these ideas are nothing on their own. It takes communication and participation of people like you being here tonight, so thank you. We are going to take a moment to switch things up a little bit. We'll move this out of the way. We will introduce our panel for the evening. And we'll be here to accept questions. I'm going to turn on some lights because you'll also have a chance to be on camera.
Bear with me for a moment. This is from one of our members. I see great things in the future for TZM, and we will get there one way or another. That I am sure about. As testimony to that, last year in November, I had the opportunity to give a seminar about why I think getting to an RBE is inevitable. To an audience of affluent conservatives, they did not know what I was going to talk about. Just that it was finance investment related, that they liked. I really doubt I would have been given the opportunity, liberty, to make this presentation. Where and when, and if I gave them my truth theme up front, I don't think so. Even then, I had to tone it down to make it acceptable to most people's expectations. But I wanted to test these ideas and materials to a difficult-to-reach crowd. Well, as you might guess, the ideas were rejected by some, as expected. But there was others that thought it was wonderful. One woman was in tears. Go figure. Most just seemed to say, well, that's interesting. If some people in this audience can get it, we are going to get there. That I am sure about. As to when, I am not too sure. So with that in mind, I'm going to say that's what we're about, because we're working on the when part of it. And thanks for setting this up. And I just want to take a minute. Joe, are you here? Joe, would you come up to say a word?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Eva. It's just in me to talk about this. I can't help it but promote the Zeitgeist movement to everybody I bump into. And what Eva's talking about there is, I'll tell you the real story, what happened. I work for a wealth management company managing wealthy people's portfolios and investments and handling their financial planning. I'm kind of an anomaly in my field that I subscribe to getting rid of money, yet my career is based on making the most of money. So I deal with my schizophrenia, you know. But in any event, a high-end cruise line, which, well, I'll tell you, I'd never heard of it until they asked me to come, called Crystal Cruises. And, you know, everybody that's on that boat is well, rather affluent and what have you. And they wanted somebody to speak about investments because of all the chaos going on, and they liked my credentials and stuff like that. And I said, yeah, sure. My first seminar was about how to detect an investment fraud based on hedge funds and Madoff and stuff, and that resonated with everybody there. And then the other one, they said, well, just talk about investments or whatever you want. I'm like, really? Anything I want to talk about? So in any event, I really did have to, you might say, dumb down the Zeitgeist comments and so forth. And even when I was rehearsing what I was going to say to everybody, my wife was like, no. The no money part, Joe, you got to leave that out. They're going to throw you over the boat. It's way too much. But the point of it is that I know, as I used to say when we were always meeting and stuff like that, I'm like, this stuff really resonates with people that get it and stuff. But the real challenge is trying to get it to the people that are so indoctrinated into it, and that is further reinforced because, well, look at my house, look at my car, look at my status, look at how everybody, respects me because I make so much money and this, that, and another. These type of people where, I feel are very difficult to reach. I wanted to see, how does this message go over to them? And, like Eva said, I was really surprised. One woman was to tears about it. Then I had a couple of heads of, big S&P 500 companies there, who are, of course, going, well, what would be people's motivation? And it's money and jobs that created everything. And I'm like, actually, no, it wasn't. People just naturally create like 5-year-olds. We just do it for the reward of just creating. That's the reason why. It's not always necessity is the mother of invention. It's just natural inspiration. We all have it. We're all geniuses. The biggest waste of resource on this planet is the fact of all the ingenuity and ideas that we would have if we didn't have to entertain needless jobs that just entertain what I call needless complexity. Like my job. I sit in Century City in these office towers, and I just look at all the other office towers where you've got supposedly the brightest minds all stacked up in these vertical towers. Whereas, one morning I go to work and I see these guys hauling, crates of paper out of the building, and I'm like, that is what we produce. Okay, me and all these other attorneys, finance, tax, who are entertaining needless complexity all day long in our little boxes, produce that box of crap. I'm like, wonderful, way to go to deploy ingenuity, intelligence, and ideas. It's just completely wasted. And then not only that, but our society is so, I don't mean to use this word in the wrong way, but in its Webster's definition, retarded, backwards, if you will, that the people that I work with in my area are the ones that people aspire to emulate and be. These attorneys and investment managers and hedge fund guys and girls and stuff like that. And it's like, wait a minute, everybody is, and oh yeah, then the best part is these people are paid the most too. It's like we've got our whole value system backwards here. Myself and all my colleagues, we don't produce anything. I'll work 40 years in this industry, and this system will provide me with enough for a house and a retirement savings and everything else like that. Yet will I, after 40 years of figuring out what stocks and bonds to buy, have contributed? Absolutely nothing. And in doing it, how many great ideas will I come up with that are actually beneficial to taking care of things we really need to do? None. But, well, anyway, you can see I'm passionate about this and I can go on all night, so I'm not going to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And this is just a small example of some of the independent work that also goes on, along with the work that's on the larger scale that Jason had mentioned earlier. So thank you. And to the Q&A.
So, did you tell them how to line up or should I tell them?
Oh, am I on? Hey guys, how's it going? All right, I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit. It's a really simple way for us to kind of spread awareness of this. Everybody's always asking, like, what do we do, what do we do now? And, it's amazing how many people you talk to out there that have never even heard of the Zeitgeist or seen the movies or anything like that. And so you throw out this weird word at them, they're like, what? So there's a really easy way that we can spread the awareness, and it's called Day Z. And the first day of every single month, you just wear a Zeitgeist shirt. Just super simple. And if we can get just a small percentage of the people that are already in this movement, what is over 500,000, pushing 6, that's an amazing effect that it's going to have. You know, Joe Citizen is going to be walking down the street and see a bunch of kids in the park with Zeitgeist shirts on. Then he's going to get to work, and somebody there is going to have a Zeitgeist tie or drinking out of a Zeitgeist mug or something like that. And when he sees that word 10 times in one day, he's going to go home and he's going to Google Zeitgeist. And it doesn't matter if he spells it wrong or whatever. You can it's the first thing that pops up when you Google Zeitgeist is us. And so it's super simple. If you guys want to learn more about it, you can go on facebook.com/zeitgeistzone. That's my own little thing that I run for Zeitgeist. I put all kinds of cool, mostly positive, like stuff, innovations, stuff that we can all do to just get this thing going and stuff like that. If you want, I'm going to have a stack of business cards up here, and it has the website on it. But yeah, and Peter, if you can throw that on your global address, like the Blog Talk Radios, DayZ, that'd be awesome. Shar, you're up.
Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for coming. Jason basically went over all the events we do, but I'm an event coordinator for the Zeitgeist movement, and every year, even though we're a young movement, what we've been able to do globally as far as productions has been phenomenal. Starting the beginning of this year with the release of Peter's third movie, Zeitgeist Moving Forward, we did a screening with the movement, the chapter coordinators, and there were 350 screenings around the world in over 30 languages. So it was a huge production, no small feat. And then just a couple months later, we did our annual Z-Day, and here in LA we had quite a big event with Michael Rupert speaking and KPFK representing. And then we've started the monthly town halls, which are here to our second monthly town hall. Thank you. And then this fall, we'll be kicking off the annual Global Zeitgeist Media Festival, which is approaching it from an artistic or creative manner. So basically, I just wanted to let you know about the details. If anyone has any questions about the Media Festival, come see me afterwards. It's on Sunday, September 11th at the Music Box in Hollywood. Tickets are on sale on etix.com. You can just type in Zeitgeist Media Festival and it'll come up. And we have everyone from comedians to bands to dancers, art. There'll be a rooftop kind of DJ and light show, art gallery. So quite a bit, just something for everyone in art. And that's right, a global food drive as well. And we are donating all of the food. Everyone that comes is going to bring at least 2 cans of food. And that's going to be donated to the LA Food Bank. And they distribute to over 1,000 different sites in Los Angeles, like the Boys and Girls Club and lower income neighborhoods. So we feel like that will be able to go out in the community and benefit them. I just want to introduce, before we kick off the Q&A, the only person that hasn't spoke is Jen Wilding. She's our USA coordinator. Come on up, Jen. Woo! Feel like I'm on The Price is Right. Come on down.
Hi. Welcome. Again, some of you. I'm glad to see people coming back. So the Zeitgeist movement, we're a global movement, and we have chapters all over the place in 70 countries. We're kind of structured so that we cover everything geographically to make sure that, you know, we're infiltrating everything we can. Basically, we have a global coordinator, Gilbert Ishmael, and I'm sort of the representative of the U.S. I have, you know, state contacts that I'm talking to in meetings, helping them to coordinate sub-chapters, which are at the city and college levels. So that's kind of how we're structured, and as you've heard, we're basically a communication project, as opposed to creating a structure for a typical organization or a nonprofit or a government, or we have sometimes people coming in that are confused about us having titles as coordinators, but it's really for functional purposes, and just people like you who want to share these ideas with as many people as they can in all the different ways that they can. And we have a lot of creative people in the movement, and I hope that you can continue your participation and help become an activist. And that can happen on so many levels. It can happen at a level of a water cooler at the office, or it could happen as you helping out with an event, a larger event, or doing a presentation somewhere for a larger group. And we'll take all of it because we really want to spread the word and try to reach critical mass with these ideas. So we're going to be moving into Q&A. Brandon, where is he? Oh, yay. All right. Brandon is a Los Angeles coordinator as well with EVA.
Hey everyone, it's good to see everyone here and interested in solving social problems. My name is Brandon. I coordinate the Los Angeles chapter with EVA. We put on meetings to coordinate our awareness efforts, to put on events, and we do, we go out on the street and we engage people in discussion. Just before this town hall, we did a banner. We walked the banner literally just to the liquor store just to get something to drink. Handed out some town hall cards because we have some flyers. We have a huge box of them. If any of you guys want to pick some up to go ahead and promote this so that we can continue this building momentum, get a lot of people interested, because people are interested out there, they just may not know of it, so we got to get it out there. Other than that, we keep the message clear, so that me and Eva do a lot to facilitate other people's awareness projects. I know a lot of faces in here that have their own stuff going on, so yeah, let's jump into the Q&A.